Hey, I'm the professional wrestler with the most John-based ring names in the history of the business. Johnny Nitro, John Morrison, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Impact, Johnny Caballero, Johnny Elite. Real name John Hennigan, and I'm here on the Bootleg Universe Podcast.
So wrestling has like this interesting dynamic backstage from what I've observed, just, being around you, being around Dallas, being a little bit around the business is kind of on the periphery, right? Because it's...
Yes, but you know more about wrestling than a lot of wrestlers. Or you've put a lot more thought into it than a lot of wrestlers.
I put a lot of thought into
I'll
wrestling.
Put it that way.
Yeah. It's like if I need something to obsess about, I just kind of put it in wrestling, and I like.
Probably why we're friends, because I do the same things.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of a toxic backstage environment, behind the scenes environment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's tons of metaphors you could make to a dysfunctional relationship, but those have been made. I think one thing I've noticed is a lot of times non-altruistic behaviors and things that you would consider not nice are rewarded in the environment of backstage politics when you're talking about professional wrestling. So it's all about helping the other guy. Like when Abyss was inducted to the Hall of Fame, one thing he said, and it stuck with me, was, before you do this, why don't you turn around and do this and help the next guy up? But it doesn't seem like a lot of the guys on top ever do that. And when they do that, it's not necessarily a selfless act. They do it at a time in their career when they want to be looked at as selfless. It's not like they're going to try to put their friend over because they think it's the right thing to do. It's like, oh, you know what? I don't want to be seen as selfish. So I think what I'm going to do is start putting guys over. So when people look back, I'll be able to point at all these things that I did. Same thing with Make-A-Wish. It's not necessarily a selfless act if you keep bringing it up. And that doesn't take away the good that it's done, for all the Make-A-Wish kids. My cousin was a Make-A-Wish kid. She had leukemia when she was 7. And she still talks about it. And those kids talk about it. It means a lot. Mm-hmm. But the why of why WWE did that is interesting to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Is it true altruism?
Well, it's performative. Yeah. Wrestlers are performative by trade, right? And it seems to kind of seep into the personal life, into the backstage environment, into how the business operates. It feels like part of it's kind of glorified, right? It's like, oh, this is how this business works, and it's so different than everything else.
Imagine so Daniel Day-Lewis is a method actor and doesn't break character, as I've read. I've never met the man, but as I've read, on set for weeks, months at a time. And when he changes characters, he plays a new character. Mm-hmm. But in wrestling, your character never changes. It evolves, and you can repackage, but you never ignore the history because nostalgia is such a big part of the business. Mm-hmm. So you can change your name, you can change your look, but wrestling fans like to think back on what made you who you are, like the previous gimmicks and names and outfits and finishing moves. It all becomes part of who you are currently.
For sure. Because once your character clicks, Steve Austin, Stone Cold's great. I was watching, and preparing for this, I was watching a promo that him and Paul Heyman did when he was stunning Steve Austin, right? Yeah. And he talked different. He looked different. I'm like, this is not the Steve Austin that we know.
Right.
You obviously know him better than I do. But like,
no, but that's astute. And like,
yeah.
I think one thing, he's one of my favorite guys, like in the business.
He's a great guy.
Because he never ever looked down on wrestling. Like he never thought it would, I know what, I'm going to be an actor now. Screw wrestling. Oh, wait a minute. No, if I say screw wrestling, I alienate fans. I love wrestling and I'm an actor. Like he never did that. Like, what do people think thing? He's been a pro wrestler. He was the ringmaster. He was Stunning Steve. When he was the Hollywood Blondes with Brian Pillman, I think is when I saw like nuggets of like Stone Cold's first like seeping in, but he didn't forget all that. And that all made him who Stone Cold Steve Austin was and is now.
And I love how he seems to be really involved and really seems to deeply care about the community of wrestling.
Did I tell you the story about one of the first times I talked to him? I was on the road with Matt Hardy and Kennedy, and both of them were doing like this Stone Cold impersonation. And I got to the hotel and my phone rang, and it was just like, "Hey, is this John Morrison? Saw that match. They had old Jeff Hardy, liked the shit out of it." And he said that. And so I was like, "Oh, would you like the shit out of it?" "Oh, yeah? What'd you like, old man?" And he's like, "What?" I said, "What?" He's like, "Excuse me? What are you talking?" And then it kind of dawned on me. I was like, "Oh, crap. Like, this probably isn't Ken or Matt Hardy. This might actually be Stone Cold." And it was. He just watched SmackDown and saw a match and decided, you know, I'm gonna call these guys and tell them I like their match and then talk to them. And I think that's what you're talking about. He cares about the community. He just wanted to tell me he thought the match was good.
I remember when he reached out to you because you didn't invite him to your wedding. Remember? And we were like talking about it. I'm like, dude, he legit. This was like you're married to a wrestler. Like he wanted to be at your wedding.
What the hell, Johnny? I thought we were friends. Yeah. And I was like, Steve, I thought you were busy.
You're Stone Cold.
I thought you were so busy.
It was hilarious. It was hilarious talking you through that.
But I guess the reason I brought up Daniel Day-Lewis and like the tangent is when you're that character for all that time and you don't change, even though you evolve, the line of like where you are and where your character is becomes blurred. And years and years and years go by, and then Breakfast with Blassie, or in his book, early in the book, he sits down at dinner with his mom, and he says something like, "Pencil neck geeks aren't fit to tie Freddie Blassie's boots," and his mom goes like, "Freddie, why aren't you just nice to people like you used to be?" And his answer is like, I was like dumbfounded. I was like, huh. Yeah, growing up, I was a different person.
Yeah.
But you're a character at that point, he was Freddie Blassie for 30, 35 years. And it took his mom just making a really easy observation to point out, like, don't be a jerk. This lady's just taking your order. But I think that's one thing that happens. The idea that, like, I deserve to be champ. I deserve everything. People might say is selfish, but also is rewarded because it's part of like this like blind confidence in who you are, and sometimes a lack of self-awareness makes that confidence layer thicker.
Because you have to like believe you are this character. You have to like believe that you are this like immortal dead dude who can like show up and like tombstones.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Or
if you think about it intellectually, like then your thought process, like you add a couple stops before you speak.
Yeah, you have to become
it becomes obvious.
Right. You have to become the character and not play a wrestler.
Yep.
Right. And I guess we've seen that throughout history. Like the guys that like really get over with the crowd, the guys that really like the characters, let's call it the characters that really connect. That's why they become nostalgia acts later. Cause it's like, no, don't change. Don't change. Be that one thing that connected, right?
I mean, there's the Glee quote, confidence is a better indicator of success than talent.
Right.
Just look at John Stamos. Not to say he's not talented, but like in wrestling, like sometimes confidence is more important than talent because it piles up, and then the confidence makes your character seamless.
But so, and I think maybe there are a couple exceptions to everything, right? Like, so I want to shout out like Jericho for instance, because he is the exception to this role. He can come out as a different character every week, and he crushes it. I just think that speaks to his
I completely agree, but also like if you erased all of his history and he just showed up, his reaction and acceptance would not be what it is. Like the wrestling community knows like how much work and effort and energy
for sure. But for sure, that's like saying if Jack Nicholson just acted in a movie tomorrow and he did this bit, like, Jack Nicholson hasn't acted in a movie in a long time. If he had this if he was acting as like the Joker in the next Batman movie, that would be a big fucking deal, right? It'd be a huge deal. People would be like, what?
I guess, that's a universal
thing, right? But I'm saying like Jericho has never deviated it or regressed into a nostalgia act at any point. He's like,
that's a good point.
So he's actively
constantly reinventing himself.
He's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy, thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
He's written 2 books.
Yeah.
2 books. 3. He's written a bunch of songs.
Yes. A lot of songs, a lot of music.
More than 2 songs.
And he's got a podcast.
I've done his podcast. Yeah.
Yep. Me too.
I
loved his podcast.
His podcast is almost as good as your podcast.
He's been doing it a lot longer than I've been doing it. So, I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is there's got to be a mental health toll to this, right? Like when I used to run around with you knew me during the makeup phase when I would like run around and I was always playing a character.
Right.
It got fucking exhausting. It just got fucking exhausting.
Yeah, and when I met you, you were doing that, but I didn't meet you in character.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you didn't, I'm glad you didn't act like your character because it probably would have been like,
No, because I actively wanted to be your friend. I was like, I want to be friends with this dude.
You like let your guard
down. So then I like took it and I was like, oh, hey man, what's up? And you're like,
real conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. You're right. And it is exhausting.
Right.
And then like sometimes like your like conversational instincts like click for your character faster than they click for yourself the longer you're in character.
Absolutely. And then it feels weird to be yourself and easier to be this character that's just running around saying that I'm the greatest thing ever and that whole thing. Can we talk about CM Punk?
Sure. Man, what to say about Punk? I've wrestled the guy like not recently, but probably close to 100 times.
Yeah.
When we were on the road. And
you guys started with the ECW feud, right?
And at the beginning, we were like butting heads quite a bit. And maybe it took like 20 matches. And then after that, from then on, I thought like our chemistry was on point and he became one of my favorite opponents.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was real smart about psychology. A lot of people didn't have this experience with him, but I thought he was giving and smart. And was good at constructing matches. And what we did was a collaboration. And again, like this was earlier in his career and everyone's got a unique experience and point of view, but that was how I thought like our run went.
Well, he recently had a meltdown.
You know what's crazy? Like I listened to the audio before I watched the video.
Yeah.
And even the audio, like it was funny listening to it and just picturing, because my friend had told me that like he's sitting right next to Tony and Tony's just like flinching and doesn't know exactly how to react. And then I watched the video and I think so he's always had like a temper when things don't go his way. And in his defense, what he wants is to make it. He's the guy that wants to make it and screw anything that gets in his way was his mentality then. I think it still is now. I think sometimes though, like personally, I've got destructive self-energy and if anything doesn't go my way, I don't lash out, I lash in and I beat myself up and Punk does both. So when he, who do you have the match with that night? And
Moxley.
Him and Mox, and he retained.
he didn't retain. He won.
He won. He won.
Yeah.
That's right. No, he didn't retain. He won the championship back. And I don't know exactly the extent of his injuries, but I think he tore something like his upper tricep or something. Yeah. On the dive. And I saw a picture of it. It looked like a weird reach and it got pinned, which is very frustrating, especially like when you get to be his age. You're older than me. Basically my age. When you get hurt, it's not like getting hurt in your 20s. It takes a lot longer. And it's not necessarily the pain that's upsetting. It's the knowledge that like, okay, like if this is a fully torn tricep, that's what, 6 months to a year before it's functioning at close to 100%. If you come back earlier, you could re-injure it. Like, so there's a lot of things that are probably going on in his head. I battle with constantly, like, it didn't move exactly how I wanted to move. And I still, in my head, when I close my eyes, picture myself as 25. And of course I can't move that way. You know what I mean? That's what happens when you get older. You know, the years go by and there's diminishing returns to your effort physically. Like, you work harder to be able to function less athletically. And it's just a fact of science. That's what happens when you age. So he's frustrated because he's got this big opportunity to carry a company. And he's got this huge paycheck, and he tears his tricep
after hurting the foot
and his foot. Yeah. And his foot. And I think stuff like it's not hilarious that he got hurt. It's actually the shits. Like, it's really
tragic.
sad.
I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Like, he's one of the people in the business of pro wrestling that changed the course of the industry. And it's never cool to see anybody like that get hurt. And so what I think is funny is how he dealt with it. Because in some ways he just lashed out at the entire AEW roster. Whether they deserved it or not, I don't know. Like, from his point of view, they did. From my point of view, professionally, I would never personally say that about a lot of the roster, just because I don't think it's good business. But on the other hand, that's what he's known for. And he just reverted to character, like dropping pipe bomb, right? I think he's upset, and he just kind of reverts to like, I'm going to blow the whistle on MJF, on everybody I don't like on this roster. Like, screw them. Screw Colt Cabana. Like, he's obsessed with Colt Cabana. And screw everybody. Like, everything that's bothering me, I'm just going to air it right now and call everyone on their crap. And
yeah, it just, I watched it. It just felt like this was a dude who needed help. This was like a mental health crisis, right? And it's
so,
like, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Actually,
well, it's a mental health crisis. This is a dude, a performer, sure, and it's no different than if Paul Rudd like just had a panic attack. I mean, he was like, this was like a panic attack. This was not like, this was sure, frustration. There's a thing, but like this was to me, it looked like a dude having.
How about the Christian Bale incident?
The same thing.
And the feedback on that, I think, has wavered between like what a jerk that guy is. Like, I can't work with him, to like actors and people in the industry I know, it's kind of siding with Christian Bale more.
Totally. It's a great comp because yeah, like, I think to the general public, like, oh my God, this guy's crazy. But like, yeah, but also like he's an artist.
To be in the
he's
moment
a sensitive
of that
artist.
Scene, like, you have to like lower your guard and be really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And like, he's trying to do the best scene he can while he's in this emotional state. And I think you could compare it to that like pretty well. Although Christian Bale pretty much kept his outburst to the guy messing with the light. And Punk just like everyone. And not Moxley.
No,
but I think he was upset at Moxley.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the whole thing's unfortunate.
Yeah.
And
it's think about this. Like, what if? And I've thought about this a lot. what if Punk went to therapy and was just kind of like a really kind of mellow, chill, happy guy? Would he be as interesting as he is to watch? Just entertainment-wise.
So I don't know him as well as you do. I've had dinner with him once. Right? Mm-hmm. This is right before the pandemic. I think, yeah. The vibe I got from him, because I can like, one of my things is I'm able to like read people.
Yeah.
Yeah. He would have benefited from like ayahuasca. Right?
Yeah.
Because there's a thing that's interesting about him.
No, go ahead.
But I think you're making the assumption, John, that
I've never tried ayahuasca, so I don't know. And you're right, I am making assumptions.
You're making an assumption that the pain is what makes him interesting versus having access to that, right? If he heals himself, it's not like he doesn't have access to the character, right?
True.
It's maybe gives him more control over the dial.
Well, and like, there's also something to be said for, this is an idea from Dario Cueto from Lucha, who, when talking about this exact thing, hates the idea that you have to be in pain to give an emotional performance. He thinks that, and I agree, you could be in pain or you could be extremely happy. And if you're extremely happy, it's really easy to think what would happen if you lost the things that made you happy, and you're in touch with that pain and you're able to act, basically. That's what it is.
Yeah. I feel like the most interesting performers that I know personally, and I'm not limiting this to just wrestling, I'm limiting it to all entertainment, are people who have had serious tragedy, have gone through serious emotional upheaval, but have come out on the other side of it. It's not, the pain isn't controlling them. The pain has given them a glimpse into a deeper understanding of humanity, of the human experience. And then they're able to access that to channel something deeper. And that allows them to connect with the wider audience.
We've talked about, I've never met Tom Hardy personally, but just talked about him before, and like, just like knowing his background, like how he came up, and maybe former heroin junkie maybe, and not anymore though, reformed like you just said, but still able to tap into that like dark place, which adds layers and layers of nuance to his characters. It's like you can tell when he's acting that there's a lot going on that's being unsaid.
Yeah. And I feel like as an audience member, right? I think what's happening on a subconscious level is when you look into someone's eyes and you're like, oh, I can connect with them because I understand their pain, therefore they understand me, and we are similar, right?
Because I mean, pain is a universal.
Yes,
truth.
it's what connects us.
Yeah.
But if pain is what's driving the car, then you are a passenger in your own life. Your ego is then making decisions for you.
Right.
Versus if you can observe the pain, and then the pain gives you access to the kind of deeper emotions, but you got to heal that, right?
Agreed.
And that's
that's the mental health issue
that's the mental health issue
on. And I totally agree. And like, pain's not the only universal human emotion.
No.
I mean, there's happiness and love and
but wrestling,
fear,
wrestling is kind of pain driven, right? Because it's wrestling. The way I look at wrestling is it's a Western, right? It's someone wronged me, I'm going to get justice. And I'm either going to do it through a way that makes me a heel or a face.
The vast majority of everything, the vast majority, you're right, is just like we're watching a revenge movie.
Right. It's a
short
pain
revenge movie.
Sure. So it's a pain driven thing, right? And so some things are like Liam Neeson in Taken, great revenge movie, boom, we're on his side. Then you've got other versions of it that are like more like the Korean thriller I Saw the Devil, where the protagonist goes so far that the protagonist becomes the heel. That's like Bret Hart, Austin, WrestleMania 13, right? Where the roles switch.
And in movies, I think that's what makes a good villain too. when you can understand the person.
Yeah. You understand the humanity behind the villain.
Then it's scarier.
Right.
If you're like, oh, wow, like I see the humanity of that person and I can identify part of that here and look at the horrible things that person's doing. That's terrifying.
Yeah. It also feels more real because there's a part of you that you can see yourself in that.
Yeah. If it's not real, it's not as scary to me.
Right.
Because then you're watching a cartoon and you're like, oh.
Well, I think that's kind of why punk connects with an audience because people connect with his pain. They're like, this is a dude who's like, we can talk about, you mentioned Tom Hardy, who, he has had a rough COVID. Just in one conversation with Phil, I'm like, this dude is hurting. Like he needs a fucking hug. Like this dude I was like, this guy needs a hug. And I respect the shit out of him as an artist, but I'm like, dude, you are like literally sitting here in pain. I don't know what to do about it. This is fucking terrible.
Right. And I mean, you nailed it pretty well. And like, I think that's part of the problem with wrestling is, if you look at the guy, like, I mean, what is he in the top 0.1% of professional wrestlers? Like, just if you think of the success and like
Phil, CM Punk? Dude, no, like, I would say more than that.
0.01%.
You put him in like the top 30
upper echelon of like people that have had an impact on the business historically, titles he's held, how over he's been, how popular he is in Chicago, especially, but everywhere. And it's fun. I always think stuff's funny, but it's ridiculous and crazy to think that he still is in that much pain and still it's not good enough for him. Well, that is the trick with pain. Well, that's the trick of pain, right? Yeah. Like you can't solve the pain externally. Like if you don't feel love, you don't feel loved, you've never experienced love, getting an Oscar and having like a stadium of people applauding you and telling you're the greatest, you won't feel that because you can't get that shit from the external world. It has to be solved internally. You have to love you. Which presents an interesting conundrum. If you love you, fear comes in because at some point, the happier you get and like the less pain that you feel daily, you start to worry that, is that my motivating force? Is that that's the am I trading happiness for ambition? But that is the mental health crisis in wrestling. Yeah. You're hitting the nail on the head of it because I can tell you for a fact that is just simply untrue. But there is this fear mechanism of Ric Flair having to be Ric Flair. Right? Look, I don't know Ric Flair, so I shouldn't. No, but there is a fear mechanism that is saying, hey, your pain. You can exploit it. And it can be physical pain. It can be emotional pain, right? Like, oh, I broke my arm and I was supposed to be out for 2 years, but I came back in 3 months. Yay. The crowd loves me for sacrificing my body. Or in the CM Punk instance, that's the emotional pain, right? Like hey, I'm going to leverage my emotional pain. I'm going to get this reaction. And there's a safety in staying hurt. Yeah. Like you said, like not even necessarily physically, emotionally. Yeah. Like hurt and because it's right there. You can tap into it. You don't have to worry about like, oh man, if I'm too happy, like what do I do? Right. Or if I release the anger. Yeah. If I just forgive everyone and say, look. Will it be gone forever or will it still be there? Can I still, be a great promo guy or, or whatever it is. And I can tell you for a fact, just because this is kind of my side hustle, I guess. It's not even a hustle. It's just a thing I do. Like I deal with mental health and I help people through this. And I guess I don't publicly talk about it. So, but yeah, I mean. No, you do. You do. I do? Yes, you do. Really? Only to you. Yeah, I know. But like, yeah, anyway. No, tell me. I've told you this story. Like one key to happiness is figuring out what you want. Like, what do you want? But that's like the hardest question to answer. I could never answer it. And when I was talking to you that one time on the phone, you just tweaked it and said, instead of what you want, like, how do you like to feel? And what are you doing when you feel that way? For some reason, that question is way easier for me to answer. Yeah. And it kind of led me to the answer of the original question. It's just a little mental cue that tricks you and helps you jump to an answer that's scary to get to and then can be kind of a rock and something to attach yourself to a foundation.
But do you know why that is? It's because when you say, what do I want? That's in your head, right? Everyone has multiple brains, and your brain is just one of multiple brains. Now your brain can be programmed, right? Like when you're a kid, you know, oh man, I saw The Rock holding the title. Oh great, okay, I want that.
Young and confident, and awesome, and I want that. Yeah.
But feeling that drops down. That is not really a programmable. I mean, I guess it is programmable, but less so. So feeling kind of is more authentically moving you towards your moral code. It's like how you want to feel, right? So you can look at that and say, okay, well, man, I want to feel that. And then you can go, well, why? And then it's easier to ask why. And you're like, okay, because I want to feel accepted. And if a stadium full of people are accepting me and they're chanting, you know, Johnny or CM Punk, then I'll feel accepted.
Right.
And then a good therapist goes, okay, so you want to feel accepted. Now the trick is realizing that that's not going to come from the external world, because the external world really cannot affect that. It's got to come from you. You have to accept you.
And that external world is like removed from your inner circle that knows you personally even.
Right.
So it's twice removed.
Right. And maybe there's like a few relationships, and then the next layer of that, right, is like, okay, well, you have some emotional blocks that are keeping you from loving you or feeling accepted. So then you go, okay, well, what are those? Okay, maybe I had a really tumultuous relationship with my father.
Right.
And he was working all the time and he never spent any time with me. So I felt like he didn't love me, and then I never loved me. Right. Is that pardon?
Just kidding. Sorry.
But then you go address that.
At a time like this.
But then you go address that.
Yeah.
Right. Then you go address that. And then you talk to the father, and then you have like an honest conversation if you're able to, right?
Right.
And then you can heal that.
And it's tougher if you can't talk to the father, because like sometimes that's impossible for one reason or the other. First of all, I just want to bring up that this is exactly what you said. You don't know if you do. You totally do.
I guess I only do it for like people I
not like
care about.
Just not professionally.
I don't do it professionally.
You do it for your friends.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. My friends. I'm just like, all right, let's.
You have other things you do professionally.
Like TV shows.
Too many things.
Yeah. But I feel like, you know, when I looked at the whole thing with CM Punk, and I just went back to like this like 2-hour one-on-one dinner that him and I had, and everything that I was feeling off of him there, right? But it also felt like he was very closed off to this thing. Now, people who are very closed off, a lot of times they're in like pain, dude. They're in a lot of pain.
Yeah, that's the reason they're closed off.
Right.
Because
it's not safe to be open.
Like you've ripped your heart open and been bleeding in public. And that's how you get the energy and like the motivation for your character. But then like everyone starts throwing daggers at you.
Or it's childhood.
Close it up.
And it's childhood, but it comes back to childhood, right? So there's like childhood betrayal there, right? So, you know, with a non-existent father figure, some deep family wound usually.
Right.
It's like that person betrayed me, so therefore the world has taught me that I can't trust anybody. And then you end up like being a closed off person in pain that is running around thinking about who is going to fuck me. Who is going to betray me? I can't trust any of these people. And then
really
you're
true.
attracting, and then you start attracting people.
It becomes a self-fulfilling
prophecy, right? Because if someone's like, hey man, how are you doing? And they're like, you're like, is this guy gonna fuck me? They can feel it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what's up with this guy? You know?
And then after a while, like, it doesn't feel good to feel like that. Like, I was trying to be nice to this guy, and he's putting his guard up, and he's like poking me with a sword. Eventually, you're gonna start wanting to poke back.
Right. And I think this goes back to the mental health of it all, because these are all just mental health issues, right? This is not a personality flaw, because at the end of the day,
he's a human. Like it's a very human thing.
Yes, but I'm saying it's not a personality flaw because
agreed.
Your personality is not this. This is your trauma talking.
Right.
This is a deeply traumatized individual who. Look, I didn't get into him with like kind of his backstory and his like history and stuff like that. I just knew he was I could tell he was like a deeply traumatized dude.
And like, that'd be a good thing to talk about with him.
Right. But But yeah, I could see that this was a mental health crisis. I could see that this was the trauma talking.
Yeah.
And the pain talking.
And it is crazy to think, like, just how successful someone can be and still carry that pain. Because like you said, like you can't fix it with external success.
I actually believe that your internal, like if success is your kind of barometer for life, like there's no correlation, right? Like because
you're screwed, because what is success?
Yeah.
Like it always comes back to that. Like, is it like winning a championship? Is it getting a promotion? Is it like marrying the girl of your dreams? Is it being happy? Is it being rich? Every time you get a little something, I think success, the goal moves further, and it maybe should move further because it keeps you motivated, but it doesn't mean you have to be in pain. If you love yourself and you don't equate your happiness to success, then it's fine. If I want this, like you kind of have a moving goalpost because it won't
totally
affect you adversely.
I feel like there's a lot of times this gets conflated, right? Because the success is not going to ever alter your internal state. Money will never alter your internal state. Like that, those are you can kind of temporarily change your surroundings, but it will not alter your internal state. Only like working on yourself will alter.
Completely agreed.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I mean, you also have to define success because we're both using success right now to apply to external accomplishments, basically an accomplishment-oriented success. And to some people that are probably very happy, success doesn't mean that. It might mean being happy, which this is a little tangent we need to go down. But for intents and purposes, we're defining success as accomplishment driven right now.
Yes, absolutely, accomplishment driven success, right? Because
Yeah.
I, by the way, don't subscribe to that. I mean, as you know, like
no, I agree.
When we first met, I literally said, you were like, "Oh man, you're a successful dude." I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna burn it all down because I want to express myself this way with the makeup and the right, like
yeah,
exactly.
Which is confusing to people because like the term success is thrown around by different people and it could carry different meanings.
Yes. I defined at that point in my life, and I mean, I still do, but I defined success differently than the mainstream definition of the word, right? It wasn't like...
Oh, I completely do. But when I talk about it, like I'm talking to you about it, I reduce it to mean accomplishment-driven things.
Yes.
So we can quantify it.
Right. So we're going to like speaking the same language and it's not confusing, right? You're not like, okay, I'm saying donut, but really what I mean is bagel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or how donuts make me feel.
Yeah.